So good day, this is the report of Group 3 about web services using SOAP and WSDL and UDDI. So next slide. What are web services? So una, alamin natin kung ano bang ibig sabihin ng web services. So yung web services ay pag-transfer ng data from machine to machine or device to device by using an internet or a network. So sa web services, kinakailangan ng dalawang machine or dalawang device, which is gumagamit sila ng medium. So, kailangan mayroon silang medium na ginagamit. So, pwedeng internet network sa pagpasa ng data. So, kailangan yung isang machine, para may pasa yung data, dadaan muna sa router o kaya sa network papunta sa kabila. So, based sa IBM, a web services is an interface that describes a collection of operations that are network accessible through standardized XML messaging. So, ganun lang din sa sinabi ko kanina, collection of data or an operation. So, meaning, dito ang binabasa niya ay yung XML messaging. So, ibig sabihin, kung ano yung laman ng XML mo, kung ano yung nakalagay doon, yun yung pinapasa niya papunta sa kabilang machine or device. So, next is Microsoft XML Web Services. So, expose useful functionality to web users through a standardized web protocol. So, first thing, alamin muna natin kung ano yung web protocol. So, yung web protocol daw ay data transmission processes between computers or routers within a network. So, meaning nun is gumagamit daw ng routers to pass data by the use of the network. So, gaya lang din ang sinabi ko kanina, kasi di ba kailangan ng medium, which is yung medium na yon ay yung router or yung network. So, provide a way to describe their interface in enough detail to allow a user to build a client application to talk to them. So, mas madali daw na ilalarawan yung mga ginagamit or mga sinasabi sa paggawa ng project or application. So, lumalabas parang isa to sa mga advantages ng paggamit ng web services. Are registered so that potential user can find them easily. So, nagiging connected to each other daw yung dalawang machine when passing data transmission. So, pag ganon, we can track easily since parehas naman silang connected to each other na. So, next slide po. So, why web services? So, bakit nga ba web services? So, ano bang kahalagahan nito? Ano bang importansya nito? So, from business standpoint. So, yung standpoint means kung ano yung nakikita ng isang person or object sa another person or object. So, meaning, business standpoint. Ano bang nakikita ng business sa web services? So, gaano ba kahalaga yung web services pagdating sa business? So, meron dito integration within an organization and between companies. So, just like what I've said kanina, nagiging connected to each other yung gumagamit neto, meaning nagiging iisang organization sila or nasa iisang field. So, another is allow time, cost efficiencies. So, practical daw kasi nakakalis ng paggamit ng time kasi mas madaling ipadala yung message by the use of web services. Ginagamit na din natin ngayon ito para maabili, para makapag-order, makapagtanong, or makapag-search, and also makapag-request ng any process na gusto nating malaman or makuha. So, yun lang po. Next slide, please. So, ito yung sample ng web service architecture. Pero based siya sa service-oriented architecture. So, dito, yung service requestor tsaka yung service provider, pwede natin silang i-assume na dalawang machine or dalawang device. So, si requestor, ipapasa niya yung data papunta sa kabila, which is yung service registry o yung pwede natin tawagin itong network or router. So, una, si requestor, naghahanap siya ng pwedeng mapagpasahan ng data niya, which is yung service registry nga. Pagkatapos, pag nakuha na yun yung service registry, or ni router, ipapasa niya naman yun sa kabilang machine or device. So, doon, pag naipasa na yung service, pag naipasa na yung data mula kay requester hanggang kay provider, masasabi natin na connected to each other na sila, which is magbabind na sila. So, meaning, pwede na rin magpasa si provider ng anything data kay requester. So, yun lang po yung web services. Next po. So, ito naman yung architecture 2, pero based on XML based naman sila. So, dito, ganun ulit, si requester tsaka si provider. So, dito, si requester gumamit ng, dito, ng SOAP, which is Simple Object Access Protocol. So, protocol ulit, maraming uri ng protocol like Internet Protocol. So, dito gumamit siya ng SOAP to pass the data in the network or router. So, pagtapos nun, pinablish siya by the use of WSDL para maipunta yung data kay service provider. So, dito, maraming pwede siyang gamitin na web services. So, hindi lang WSDL, pwede ring WSCL or Web Services Conversation Language, tapos pwede ring JSON WSP or pwede ring WSFL or Web Services Flow Language. So, yun lang po. Next po. So, XML leveraging feature. So, ano ba yung pinaka-importansya netong XML? So, ano ba yung pinaagamit niya? Ano ba yung tinetake advantage niya? So, dito, XML namespace. So, meron dito collision, tapos common XML element names, tapos application or specific or embedded in message. Tapos, allow composition of multiple XML documents. Identifies elements belonging to the same document type. So, overall, kasi yung XML, meron siyang feature na nakakapag-separate ng another element kasi 'di ba meron siyang hindi ka pwedeng parehas ng element name tsaka ng element attribute. So, napaghihiwalay niya yun yung features ni XML. Dahil doon, naiiwasan niya yung collision or yung pag-collide ng dalawang magkaparehas na name. And also, dahil doon, mas madaling na-identify ni XML yung mga elements kung saan siya nabibilang. So, the next po. So, dito po ay tinatawag ko na po yung next reporter. Salamat po.
Simple Object Access Protocol, or put simply, a SOAP. So, what is SOAP? As its name suggests, it is a protocol, a messaging protocol that was designed to exchange information across the internet or a web service. SOAP is already a second generation XML protocol, meaning it has more advanced stage of technology than previous models or protocols. And it takes advantage of these two, which are XML namespace and XML schema. So the first generation of XML protocol is actually the XML itself, or the XML 1.0. And we know that XML is not just a markup language to tag data, but also used and developed to store and exchange data across the web. So RPC, or XML Remote Procedure Call, is an example of another protocol which uses XML to encode its calls and HTTP as a transport mechanism. For example, when a URL is entered into the browser sends an HTTP command to the web server, directing it to the search and transmit the requested web page. So, to put it together, If you type or call anything into the browser, the RPC protocol will take effect and the data will be sent over to HTTP. After that, you'll get a response from the web server. First generation XML issue. First is the extensibility. All protocol architects had to be for changes, meaning you can't change the protocols by yourself, obviously, unless all the majority, unless all, not only the majority of architect agreed to change it. Avoid namespace means XML namespace are difficult to use and namespace support in XML parser is also difficult to implement correctly. Though namespace are still can be used in XML, but we can say that it is not efficient to use. Another issue of XML protocol is data typing, single DTDs, limited use of XML elements, and descriptive nature of elements are sacrificed because there are only a number of elements that can be used in XML. That is why XML schema is a better choice. So this is the SOAP history. In 1998, Microsoft released Team SOAP and worked with Beanstalk in 1999 to release SOAP 0.9. Beanstalk is a server that is also developed by Microsoft. Then they submitted to the Internet Engineering Task Force or IETF, and SOAP 1.0 was released in December. In 2000, SOAP 1.1 was submitted to the World Wide Web Consortium or W3C with IBM, and IBM released Java SOAP implementation, and then some began work on the web in J2EE, which stands for Java to Platform Enterprise Edition. And the W3C XML protocol is a working group release SOAP and 1.2 in 2000. SOAP messaging layers. So basically what happens here, both parties are using the same application or platform such as Facebook. The message or the data will be sent using the application interface, and then SOAP and XML processing will take place before it is delivered via HTTP until it reaches the server and receive a response. And the process is vice versa. So SOAP messages. SOAP messages have three structure. First, the header, or the envelope, followed by the header and the body.
A SOAP message is a simple XML document that has the following elements. An envelope element, which is the root element indicating that the XML document is a SOAP message. And a header element naman is containing header data. A body element that carries information about the call and response. So, so a SOAP message must be encoded using XML. Must use the SOAP envelope namespace, must not contain a DTD reference, and must not contain XML processing instructions. SOAP envelope. The required SOAP envelope element is the root element of a SOAP message. This element defines the XML document as a SOAP message. SOAP header. The optional SOAP header element contains application-specific information like authentication, payment, and etc. About the SOAP message, if the header element is present, it must be the first child element of the envelope element. Note all immediate child elements of the header element must be namespace qualified. SOAP ENB must understand. The SOAP must understand attribute can be used to indicate whether a header entry is mandatory or optional for the recipient to process. If you add must understand is equals to 1 to a child element of the header element, it indicates that the receiver processing the header must recognize the element. If the receiver does not recognize the element, it will fail when processing the header. Soap body. The required soap body element contains the actual soap message intended for the ultimate endpoint of the immediate child. Elements of the soap body element may be namespace qualified.
Data encoding in SOAP. SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. It is a standard-based web services access protocol that has been around for a long time. The ability for web applications to communicate across the internet is critical. So that's why SOAP was established for these purposes. SOAP allows applications running on various operating systems, technologies, and other programming languages to communicate with one another. Why reinvent the wheel? To take the place of older technologies that don't work well on the internet, such as distributed component object model or DCOM. Simple data types. Use XSI type. The XSI type and attributes is used to indicate to the schema validator the true type of a particular instance of an element is not element declared type but rather a subtype derived the declared type. String, floats, and etc. is under of simple data types like integers and others. Complex data types, SOAP arrays. SOAP arrays have a very specific set of rules which require you specify both element type and array size. SOAP also supports multidimensional arrays, but not all SOAP implementations support multidimensional functionality. To create an array, you must specify as an XSI type of array. The array must also include an array type attributes. These attributes is required to specify the data types for the contained elements and the dimensions of the array. So structs of compound types. Structs contains multiple values, but each element is specified with a unique accessor element. For example, consider an item within a product catalog. In this case, the struct might contain a product SKU, product name, descriptions, and price. Key is how such a struct would be presented in SOAP message. So data referencing, href, and ID attributes. Data referencing, the href attributes specify the link's destinations. For example, like href is equals to double quote HTTP. This the usual link we have in our webs. So an ID is a unique identifier to aid in processing. You can annotate an element uniquely with attributes of type ID. As an ID is equals to double quote I underscore 35867. Take note, IDs can start with a number, which often assumes an associated DTD containing the attribute list declarations. So go to the next slides. Data encoding in SOAP. Binary data, basics for encoding. SOAP is an XML-based protocol, which means that all data includes SOAP envelope must be text-based. If you want to include binary data in SOAP message, it too must be text-based. To achieve this, You can convert binary data to base 64 encoded string and simply embedded the string inside the SOAP message. The diagram shows the sample message with binary data embedded as a 64 base encoding. While this is a simple approach for dealing with binary data SOAP, there are a few things to consider. When binary database is encoded, it increases a size by approximately 30% for small amounts of binary data. For small amounts of binary data, this probably won't be in an issue, but for larger volumes of data, the increased message that size can significantly impact performance. And then can roll your own schema, encoding style, interoperability issues. This is the sample program or sample program of SOAP or code of SOAP rather. SOAP protocol binding HTTP. HTTP is a hypertext transfer protocol. This is to aid to design designed to enable communicate between clients and servers. HTTP communicates over TCP/IP, and HTTP client contains to an HTTP server using TCP. After entering a connection, the client can send a HTTP request to the server. So this is the HTTP, the host, content type, content length, so SOAP action directing service, and this is the in-message content. The SOAP binding specification defines the structure of the SOAP message, not how they are interacted in this gap. Is filled by one called SOAP binding. SOAP bindings are mechanisms which allow SOAP messages to be effectively exchanged using the transport protocol. Most SOAP implementation provides for binding for common transport protocol, such as HTTP or SMTP. HTTP is synchronous and widely used. A SOAP HTTP request specify at least two HTTP headers, content type and content length. This is the content type and this is the content length. The content type header for a SOAP request and response defines the MIME or MIME type for that message and the character encoding optional used for an XML body of the request or response. This one. And then go to the next page. Other SOAP protocol bindings. So like what I saying, HTTP is for referencing and it's a hypertext protocol designed to enable communicate between clients and servers. Similar to HTTP, use post. The post or the use post method is used to create new resources. It is used to create subordinate resources that is subordinate to some other. Like example, different resources. And return 200 for success. On successful creation, return HTTP status 200, return a location header with a link to the newly created resource within the 200 HTTP status. Post is neither safe nor idempotent. It is therefore recommended for non-independent resources request. And 500 for failure plus SOAP fault. SOAP fault in SOAP, an error result is returned to the client as a SOAP fault with HTTP response code 500. If no SOAP faults have been received, This means that the request was successful. And the SMTP. HTTP is synchronous, while SMTP is asynchronous and is used in last resort of particular case. And in Java implementation of SOAP, usually provide a specific binding for the JMS or Java Messaging System Protocol for SMTP. SOAP message with attachment. So that's all.
So this is the example code for our SOAP RPC getCode. The source code for the IBM supply SOAP service is getCode ay hinihingi o kinukuman by the SOAP server via SOAP decoder. The code also have URI na ginamit, which is the URN methods delay codes followed by the name of SOAP converter and SOAP service. Next, RPC invocation message. The RPC or remote procedure call message ay consists of two distinct structure. At ito ay call message and reply message. The RPC message protocol is defined using the EDR data description, which include structures, enumeration, and unions. So in the screen is the example of invocation message that contains envelope where it's defined the start and the end of the message, and the body which contain the XML data comprising the message that being passed. RPC reply message. Yung RPC reply message is halos same lang sila ng coding, meron siyang envelope and a body. Ang kinaibahan lang is the RPC reply message contains a result of value that being reply or response. Roadmap. The figure illustrates the components of a service-oriented architecture. It includes a requester that invokes a service provider that offers a service, and a registry that publishes service descriptions. The service descriptions typically include the service interface, the name and the format of data to be exchanged, the communication protocol to be used, and the quality of service that the interaction is required to support. WSDL or Web Service Definition Language. The WSDL is an XML notation for describing a web service. A WSDL tells a client how to compose a web service request and describe the interface that is provided by the web service provider. The WSDL predecessor include COM-COBRA IDL, Network Application Service Specification Language from IBM, and SOAP Contract Language from Microsoft. And it was first submitted to W3C in September 2000. The current version is 1.1, where the meaning of the acronym has changed, where the D stood for definition and that the ID stood for description.
So good afternoon everyone. So I'm going to discuss the WSDL component. So here's the element. Let's first define what is the definition. It is the root element of all WSDL document. It defines the name of the web services, declare multiple namespace used throughout the remainder of the document. So it contains a definition of one or more services. JDeveloper generates the following attribute declaration for this section. So let me show you the example. So the definition, it has the name, target namespace. Target namespace is the logical namespace for information about the service. WSDL document can import over WSD documents and setting target namespace to a unique value, ensure that the namespace do not clash. Kaya dapat po lahat ng gagamitin nating namespace is must be unique. And it has XMLNS is the default namespace of WSD document, and it is set to the schema xmlsoap.org/WSDL/. Under the definition element are the type, message, port type, binding, and service. So let's define the data types or types. The data types to be used in the message are in the form of XML schemas. Types provides information about any complex data types used in WSD document. When simple data are used, the document does not need to have a type section. Type element is used to define all the complex data type which will be used to define the type of data in message exchange between the client application and web services. So kung wala naman pong complex data, no need to use the data types. That's why we don't have data types in this example. So the next one is message. Message element is used to define a message which is exchanged between the client application and web server. Each web service has two messages. It will explain the input-output operation which can be performed by the web service. So the example, the input describes the parameter of the web service and the output describes the return data from the web service. To easily identify what is the input and output in the message element, we can have a request word at the end of the name for the input and response for the input. Sa iba pa po nung message name, there is a part parameter that defines the structure of message. If each message po contains 0 or more part parameters associated with a concrete type defined in types container element. It can be integer, string, float, or etc. So in this example, much better if mauuna po yung get code request before the get code response para po hindi siya nakakalito since it is also an input-output basis. There will be no problem naman if mauuna yung response, but advisable and informality dapat mauna yung request since it is represent as input. Each of these messages contains a single part element for the request. The part specifies the function parameters. In this case, we specify a single symbol element, parameter rather, for the response. The part specifies the function return value. In this case, we specify a single result return value. So the next one is port type. Port type element combines multiple message elements, encapsulate every input-output message into one logical operation. Port are used in WSDL to define one complete operation which is offered by the web service. So this structure of port type element, it will have the information about the message element like which message will be used as an input message and which message will be used as output message, and a complete set of input and output message, we can call it as an operation. In this example, we have an operation named getCode. It has an input message that will send the data as getCode request and will receive the output message as the getCode response. So the next one is the binding. The binding elements provide specified detail on how a port type operation will actually be transmitted over the wire. Binding in simple terms is the information which the client application uses to actually bind itself to the web services. Once it's actually bound to the web services, it then has the ability to call the various operations that are exposed by the web service. Ito pong binding, it has a 3-SOAP extension element. The first one is SOAP binding. It declares where the file will be transport or send. Second is SOAP operation, kung ano every operation yung isi-send natin, which is yung get code. The last one is SOAP body, which specifies the detail of input and output of message and the namespace URN in associated with the specified service. The next one is the port. Element is a combination of binding and network address providing the target address of the service communication. The last one is service. Service element is the name given to the web service itself. This is the collection of the port. In this service element, it will give a detailed information about the endpoint, where to access the service, through which port to access the web service, and how the communication are defined. So, the WSD has a three fundamental elements. So, the first one is what a service does. Operation method provides by the service. The information regarding what services are intended to do is located in a message and import type. We have two message that we haven't specified kung ano yung input and output doon. Meron lang siyang part parameter and data type kung saan ano yung expected result na makukuha for that service. Import type component, doon na po natin may specify kung ano sa message na yun yung input and output, which is yung get code request and get code response nga. And remember, once there is a complete set of input and output message, we can call it now as an operation. At dun po natin malalaman on what the service does. Then, how the service access. This service can be across. Then how the service access. Data format and protocols details. This service can be accessed through binding. It describes how the element in abstract interface, which is yung prototype, then how the service is accessed. This service can be accessed through binding. It describes how the element in abstract interface, which is yung port type, are converted in actual data representation and protocols, for example, SOAP over HTTP. Katulad nga sinabi ko kanina, dito sa binding component, nagpo-provide ng specific detail on how a port type operation will actually be transmitted over the wire. The last one but not the least is where a service is located, address URL details. It was actually located in service component since a service a collection of port, it provides the target address of the service communication. So that's all.
For the WSDL2 code, the translator are available that can have a two under, which is the convert WSDL documents to code, and then derive WSDL from Java classes. The first under is for the convert. Ang mga gagamitin ay pwedeng IBM's WSTK Toolkit, Apache Axis WSDL2 Java program, soapy.py in Python, and then not perfect. And then for the derive from WSDL from Java classes, have two options or choices, Apache WSDL program, and then much work remain to be done. Roadmap na to, ang presentation na to ay ini-illustrate si service requester, which is si client, si service provider ay si service, and then si registry, si service organization. Si service requester and then service provider, nag-interact sila through exchanges ng mga messages. For example, XML documents, messages compliant with the SOAP specification, are exchanged between the requester and provider. Si provider, magpapublish siya ng WSDL file that contains a description of the message and endpoint information to allow the requester the SOAP message and send it to the correct destination. Another example, si service requester, magpe-perform siya o mag-fill up ng form regarding sa request niyang information. And then, dito, mag-ooperate siya and marireceive yung message sa service provider. And then, si service provider magpapublish siya ng file, WSDL file. And then, ipaprocess niya. After that, magre-respond siya sa service requestor. This is the point. So, ito naman yung mga kailangan para sa UUDI registry. Who, basic business information such as name, contact information, address, like that. What, get classification, anong mga standard industry codes, anong NA not applicable industry codes ba, where, service UIR. UIR means Uniform Resource Identifier, which is the identifies a logical or physical resource used by the web technologies. UIR may be used to identify such as place, people, concept, information resources such as the web page or in books. How describes how a given interface functions. Kung paano siya nagpa-functions yung interface na kailangan.
UDDI data structures. First, business entity. Business entity, the top-level data structure that contains information about the business providing the web service. When you find a web service, the business is added to the UDDI browser in the navigator. Second, business service. Business service contains descriptive information for a family of services, including the name, brief description, and category information. Third, building template. Building template contains information about a web service, entry point, and references to the interface specification. T-model. T-model represents the technical specification of the web services. When the web services wizard finds a web service, it also displays other web services which are compatible with the same T-model. Also, it is designed to be reusable and can contain pointer to WSDL document. Query pattern. It contains browse, UDDI yellow page that has hierarchy, search via web or standalone client app. Also, drill down. Given a specific candidate, get all the details, and invocation. Inquiry API generally accessible. Use SOAP to access fine binding. Generally accessible. Fine binding. Used to locate specific bindings within a registered business service. Returns a binding detail message. Fine binding. Fine business. Fine business used to locate information about one or more businesses. Returns a business list message. Find related business. Used to locate information about business entity registrations that are related to a specific business entity whose key is passed in the inquiry. The related businesses feature is used to manage registration of business units and subsequently relate them based on organizational hierarchies or business partner relationships. Returns a related business list message. Find service. Find service used to locate specific services within a registered business entity. Returns a service list message. Find T-model. Find T-model used to locate one or more T-model information structures. Returns a T-model list structure. Get binding detail. Used to get full binding template information suitable for making one or more service requests. Return a binding detail message. Get business detail. Used to get the full business entity information for one or more businesses or organizations. Return a business detail message. Get business detail extension. Used to get extended business entity information returns a business detail extension message. Get service detail. Used to get full details for a given set of registered business service data. Returns a service detail message. Get T model detail. Used to get full details for a given set of registered T model data. Returns a T model detail message. And also use a SOAP to access. Publishing AIP, restricted access. Save service. Save service used to register or update complete information about a business service exposed by a specified business entity. Save business used to register new business entity information or update existing business entity information. Use this to control the overall information about the entire business of the save folder APIS. This one has the broadest effect. Save binding. Used to register new binding template information or update existing binding template information. Use this to control information about technical capabilities exposed by a registered business. Save T model. Used to register or update complete information about T model. Delete service. Used to delete an existing business service from the business services collection that is part of a specified business entity. Delete business. Used to delete registered business entity information from the registry. Delete binding. Used to remove an existing binding template from the binding templates collection that is part of a specified business structure. Delete T model. Delete T model is used to hide registered information about a T model. Any T model hidden in this way is still suitable for reference purposes and accessible via the get T model detail message but it is simply hidden from the find T model result cells. There is no way to cause a T model to be deleted except by administrative petition. Add publisher assertions. Used to add relationship assertions to the existing set of assertions. Get assertion status report. Used to get a status report containing publisher assertions and status information.
Other UDDI issues. Security. No global standard. Each operator site must select or implement an authentication protocol that still allows publishing. Versioning. Numbers not used. Generic elements used in function calls. Active search, classification, and categorization. Private UDDI registries includes e-marketplace, portal, partner catalog, internal application integration. Overall issues: interoperability, web services everywhere, peer-to-peer versus centralized. Other, other issues is whether UDDI registries are synchronized with each other. This implies that a registration is propagated to all other registries. The interoperability problem always arises during language and interface mapping because every language has different basic and complex data types, like Java, which does not support unsigned integer. In an interface which can lead to problems when Java client communicates with C++ server. Interoperability mainly occurs due to specification of complex and inconsistent APIs that makes application building a tough job. Even implementation in the Cobra is quite costly and has high defect rates. The main problem arises when language clients communicate and there is no data security and no language mapping that exists for C Sharp and VB, no support asynchronous server, side dispatch, and complete ignorance of net. A possible aspect of UDDI is the definition of an ontology for web services. Problems with it are that is centralized by design. UDDI gives businesses a way to publish their products. For example, record information about their products on the internet so that consumers and other businesses can automatically locate them programmatically or manually with web-based search tools.